Hey fam, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another reading of Lost Boy by Brent Williams with Maya Salovich. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into chapter 6. I don't know what it is, but every time I pick up this book to record, something is going on. There's a lot of commotion right now. So I'm hoping that you all can hear me. Forgive me for the excess noise. Um I don't know. I'm not going to have another opportunity to record this because I'm already behind schedule. And y'all know I do not like being off schedule and I can't leave you guys hanging. So let's go ahead and jump into chapter 6. Revelation adapted to circumstance. It's hard to imagine how something as boring as FLDS church services and meetings could have such a hold on thousands of people. You would expect that we had wildly charismatic preachers and testimonies and ecstatic music, which could engage and move people to tears and heights of joy. But my main memory of church is one of mind numbing, soul deadening, excruciating boredom. I don't recall anything about Uncle Roy's preaching. He died in 1986 when I was just 3. My grandfather took over as prophet then, and I spent hours in church being subjected to his sermons and soon Warren's. I never knew a world where a close relative was not our church's prophet. Services were held in the big meeting room in Alta Academy. At one end was a low podium on which the prophet would stand, flanked by his apostles. A large window located behind the podium bathed the prophet and the other church leaders in sunlight. This auditorium could hold at least 300 people. It had bright grass green carpeting. Grass green? Ooh. The pews consisted of folding chairs. An elaborate sound system centered in a small control room off to the left provided for amplification and recording. Of course, just sitting still for hours listening to the world's most dynamic group of preachers would bore most small children silly. But what struck me as I got older was the constant, endless, seemingly mindless repetition. FLDS services consist mainly of preaching. Not only do you hear from the prophet, but from the apostles and from other church leaders and male members who are called to share their testimony. Hymns are sung at the beginning and the end, but mostly it's just men preaching monotonously. The hymns themselves aren't exactly rockin' either. Warren saw himself as a singer, songwriter, but from my perspective, he didn't really qualify as either. His singing was amplified over that of the congregation, and it often sounded off key. I am deeply moved, dear brothers and sisters, by the things that have been spoken here today, for the wonderful support and strength that has been voiced here in support of the servants of God. My grandfather preached in 1988 after hearing testimony from church members. There has been said here all of the things that I had in my mind to say. I asked the Lord to cause it to be so. The key that stands out in my mind is the part which called upon the family to become one. How do we become one? By praying earnestly that we may have the Holy Spirit of God as our constant guide and companion. If all are imbued with that Holy Ghost in the family, they are one. There is no other way. Are you still awake? Grandfather went on. And actually, this part is kind of interesting. If there is a foreign spirit, a foul spirit aboard in the house, it must be cast out. And I call upon you all now, brethren, dedicate your homes, cast out the devil and his imps, and command them to stand rebuked from far off. He then went on to describe how he saw a large black personage, that's in quotes, at his office door one day. That made such an impression on me that the devil is at our doors. He continued, crusading against television for a while because it could bring false and delusive spirits and the imps of the devil into our houses. He read a long passage from LDS prophet Lorenzo Snow, the gist of which was that the Holy Spirit can unify our families. Of course, we didn't get the gist, we got the whole lengthy, drawn out story. There really was only one message. We, your leaders, know the word of God. You must obey us without question. Rulon even preached. God said, "Thou shalt not kill." At another time, he said, "Thou shalt utterly destroy." This is the principle on which the government of heaven is conducted, by revelation adapted to the circumstances in which the children of the kingdom are placed. Whatever God requires is right, no matter what it is, although we may not see the reason thereof till long after the events transpire. It's the way that they word things and they contradict themselves in one passage and then they say something else in another, and the way that they try to use God as a weapon. Let me continue. So obey us, even if it feels wrong or seems wrong. What? Yeah. So obey us, even if it feels wrong or seems wrong. The ends sometimes justify the means. We know what's good for you. We are God's prophets and revelators. Our revelations come straight from God Himself. See, this is the problem. Because these people are taught that these men know all and see all and hear things that others don't hear, it often keeps the others bound because they believe this mess. And that was endlessly reiterated by every prophet and testimony in virtually every sermon and priesthood leadership lesson in school and at church. Grandfather Rulon preached, above all, be obedient. Obedience is the first law of heaven, and he said, "I love you, and I want you to, I want to save you in the celestial kingdom of God. So if you will keep the grand teaching that we are trying to get over, keep the Holy Spirit of God. Keep sweet. It's a matter of life and death." Warren's motto was perfect. Obedience produces perfect faith, which produces perfect people. You can see where this leads. As a child, I would sit there and think, this is so boring. I don't understand any of the shit you're going on about. I don't understand what the hell you're saying. Obey this, obey that, do all this. What the hell are these people talking about? I was so confused. They were preaching out of the Book of Mormon. I remember wondering, why in the hell am I hearing this again? I never understood, and I didn't want to ask my dad because I knew it would piss him off, so I never asked anybody. I felt like God. I felt like God. I just heard this again and again and again. Later, I realized that that is part of how brainwashing works. Yeah. You hear something so many times, it becomes part of you, no matter whether or not you believe it's true. It's just there in your head, like breathing. You don't tell your body to breathe every time, it just breathes. And so the preaching wormed its way deep into my brain with all its commandments to obey, 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 and fear hell and the great and dreadful day of judgment, which was, we were assured again and again, coming soon. What a great thing to point out, that one of the reasons why these people are the way they are is because they are in fact brainwashed from very early on. He's talking about remembering hearing different sermons as early as the age of 3. So this is constant for them. Warren's speaking voice also had a peculiar hypnotic quality. If you didn't know him like I did, it sounded calming, almost neurotic. It was hard to remember the specifics of what he'd actually said. He spoke relatively slow with long pauses. He spoke quietly, in a low tone. So if you wanted to take in his actual words, you had to pay close attention. He kept lulling he kept a lulling kind of rhythm that was hard to avoid being entrained to. with an almost maternal quality, like he was trying to soothe a baby, like a relaxation tape. It kind of washed over you and crept around your defenses, speaking to the unconscious parts of your brain. Wow, this is. It got to you, even when you didn't realize you were hearing what he was saying. And when I was a young child, he was already well on his way to seizing control of the church. Warren's path to power began with the manner of his birth. He was the first son of Rulon's fourth wife. That doesn't sound like a particularly privileged position unless you know that his mother, Marilyn, was Rulon's undeniable queen bee. Though you might think the favorite wife position would go to the youngest or prettiest of wives, that wasn't the case in grandfather's family. Marilyn was neither. She was tall and thin, with dirty blonde hair down to her ankles when it wasn't braided or up in a bun. Wow. Down to her ankles, you guys. That's because they're not really allowed to cut their hair. She didn't strike either mom or dad as a particularly attractive woman when she was young, but she carried herself with confidence and was adept at seeking and winning power. Dad's attributes some of her strength to the fact that she was a member of the Stead family. Oh, I can't remember if it's Stead or Steed. Steed. I think it's Steed. The Steeds saw themselves as an elite in the church, with a bloodline that was blessed and designated for high rank. Marilyn brought an air of privilege to her dealings with Rulon, and she brought her kids up to believe it too. Marilyn appeared humble, reverent, and dutiful, but slyly and stealthily she promoted her own children and interests. She made herself precious to Rulon and whispered in his ear in a way that made her whims and wishes seem like his own. My father says, and she had a way of presenting ideas to Rulon that made him think they were evidence of his divine inspiration. Who else did that? There's somebody else on television right now that does that. That would be the bird. That would be Robin. If you watch the Sister Wives, that making him think that he came up with things, making him think that things were a divine inspiration. That's what Robin did. Remember, Robin was in touch with things that the other wives weren't. That's what Cody said. Interesting that we're being told that this is what happened in this young man's family. Mom says that when she married Dad, she could see that Marilyn was treated differently from all of his father's other wives. Most of them seemed intimidated by her, afraid to go against her, or even appeared to have differences with her. Not having grown up in the family, Mom couldn't see why Marilyn had this power, but its evidence was everywhere. The other women would not complain about any of Marilyn's children's misbehavior. They knew that this would somehow be turned into a mark against them. Ooh, this is good. Dad personally experienced this phenomenon as a child. Once Warren's brother Lyle ran over one of their sisters with a bicycle. The little girl was crying, and Dad could tell that what happened hadn't been her fault. He and one of his other brothers shouted that Lyle should have known better than to ride so fast where there were so many young kids playing. Next thing you know, Dad was called into his father's office and lectured about the way he and his brother had spoken to Lyle and the tone they had used. Dad tried to explain, saying that any of the mothers would have yelled at Lyle for what he did, but Rulon wouldn't hear it. The lesson they learned was that for Marilyn's kids, the rules were different. It's just so messed up that this is a thing, that this happens. We've seen it time and time again in various books. We've seen this play out on Sister Wives. We see it where people are favored so much that you actually ice out other family members. And here we have this young man saying that his mom noticed that, when it came to Warren and his brothers and sisters, they were treated differently because their mom was treated differently. Right from birth, Warren benefited from this preferential treatment. In fact, when Marilyn went into labor months earlier, Rulon was called in to pray for the health of his wife and their tiny son. It was December 3rd, 1955. There wasn't much even doctors could do. The premature Warren was so small he could fit into a man's hand, and so sickly he was not expected to survive. When he made it through those first perilous weeks, it was considered a miracle. This alone would have brought any child extra attention from his father, but combined with the fact that he was the first son of the favorite wife and with Marilyn's unbridled ambition for him, Warren was born to win favor. In my father's view, Warren stood out only as a scrawny, delicate child, tending to fade into the background among his more boisterous sisters and brothers. He had no athletic talent and soon came to prefer music, books, and art. He was socially awkward and shy, tall and thin as a beanpole. As a young man, he looked like a Archie Powell pencil necked geek. Oh wow. What? Dull brown hair, thick square glasses, a goofy, distracted face, and a clumsy gait. But Warren learned his mother's tricks well. He was diligent and well behaved at school, graduating with honors in the top 3 percentile of his class from Jordan High School, the public school in Salt Lake suburb of Sandy. However, away from the public view, it was a different story. As a teenager, my dad watched as Warren began to mirror his mother's manipulative ways. He was 4 years younger than Dad and much less popular among his siblings. To adults, he appeared pious and studious, righteous and obedient. He tried to be his father's golden boy, always seeking Ruland's attention for his good deeds while spotlighting the sins of others. So from very early on, he was showing that he was going to be a problem. He soon became known by the family as a tattletale and a scold. In fact, he brought tales of others' misbehavior to his father so often that Rulon once banished him from the house, saying that he couldn't come home until he repented and confessed his own sins. Yeah, because you over here snitching on everybody else. How you got time to pay attention to what everybody else is doing, but yet you've done nothing wrong? The only impact this seemed to have was to make Warren more subtle in the way he undermined others, hid his own perversions, and sucked up to Rulon. It certainly didn't stop his devious and deviant behavior. As a teenager, Warren is believed to have arred a boy whose parents were not members of the church. So they knew very early on that he had lewd behavior. Very early on, he raped a boy. Very early on. My dad suspects that the child's parents were paid off. It's pretty hard to imagine that, but then it's hard to conceive of much of the abuse that Warren perpetrated. No one ever went to the police or child welfare authorities, even though what had happened was whispered about within Rulon's family at the time. So a lot of people knew about it and nobody reported it, which is the problem. Because a lot of times when children come out, or even not even children, when abuse victims come out to tell their story, they're not believed or people don't report like they should. And it's wrong that they bought this family off, because money doesn't take away whatever pain that young man experienced at the hands of Warren. Dad believes grandfather was told about the assault and quietly dealt with Warren, telling him he must never do it again. Marilyn's influence was also suspected in the lenient way the situation was handled. One of Mom's half-sisters lived near the apartment where Warren and his brother Leroy stayed when they were in their late teens. She told Mom that Warren was caught more than once peeping into girls' windows where they undressed. See, this is when I have problems. All these instances where he was doing things and y'all just keep telling the stories and spreading the rumors, but not doing anything to correct the behavior and get him help. And you think that all that's going to change as he becomes an adult? No, it's going to get worse. Mom and Dad themselves once caught Warren and a few of his brothers spying on them through the window shades when they briefly stayed in grandfather's house right after they got married. There was an outdoor spiral staircase from the first to the second floors near their bedroom, and if the shade was angled just right, you could see everything that went on in the bed through the window from there. One day, Mom noticed the boys looking in from the staircase. She sat up and screamed and made Dad ensure the shade was never left in that position again. At the time, my parents didn't think much of it, but in retrospect, Mom sees a lot of Warren's behavior at the time as evidence that he was having difficulty controlling his sexual appetite. During this same period, she says she became uncomfortable with the way Warren looked at her, especially when she was with my father. He seemed lustful, she says. He looked much younger than he actually was, and before marriage, he was forbidden to have any kind of sex. Later, when Warren got his own first wife, he seemed to go out of his way to be physically affectionate with her in public, as though he was trying to show off. After Warren graduated high school, Marilyn saw to it that both he and his brother Leroy were trained in their father's accounting practice. She positioned her sons to take over when Rulon retired. This gave Warren insight into the church's finances. Holding the purse strings offers great power in any institution, but this is especially true in an organization that wasn't always on the right side of the law, particularly with regards to accounting, labor, and tax practices. But Warren soon decided to leave the accounting to Leroy. He had learned what he needed to know and was more interested in controlling people than in counting money. Though he never went to college, in 1973 he became a teacher of math, science, and the priesthood history. At the religious school Rulon opened in the compound, my dad believes that Marilyn was behind the push to open Alta Academy to give Warren a boost in the church. He soon moved up from teacher to principal. No longer would FLDS children be subjected to the influence of public schooling. Alta would shield them from worldly temptation, like the dress code that became stricter over time. A private school was another way to separate the church from the world. Warren could see that molding the minds of the next generation would give the church leadership even more control over the flock. Power, more than anything else, was what drove him. I was about to find out I was about to find that out in one of the most brutal ways imaginable. Oh boy. Chapter 7, God's Work. For those of us blessed to be in the Just family, there was an extra church session on Sundays with the prophet. He preached to the whole church only on alternate Sundays. Grandfather worshiped with our family alone on the other Sundays. Just Family Church was held in the big meeting hall in Alta Academy building. It was during those meetings in that building that Warren would commit some of his most destructive acts. There were dozens of us Jeffs. If you counted just the wives and children of Dad, Uncle Alan, Uncle David, and Uncle Joseph, that would be 8 wives and some 70 children. And that didn't include the rest of Dad's dozens of siblings, all of their wives, children, and other relatives, and his father's 19 or so wives. 19 wives, y'all. Gracious. To me, the Jeff's church seemed like any other boring church function. Children under 8 were taken downstairs to school classrooms so they wouldn't disrupt the services. The younger wives or sisters who were minding these kids would usually bring coloring books and crowns and other things to help keep them quiet. At age 8, you would be baptized, and then you had to go to the regular church and Sunday school. But there was a reason far worse than boredom that made me dread going to Just Family Church. Oh, goodness, y'all. The first time it happened, I was around 5 years old. Oh, my goodness. I was having fun with my cousins in one of the classrooms in the basement. The door opened slowly. Warren walked in and looked at the girl who was minding us. He quietly grabbed my hand and led me out of the room. He took me into a bathroom. It was an ordinary bathroom that probably had once belonged to one of Rulon's latter wives. When you came in, there was a sink and a vanity on the left and a door on the right. Through that door, in a kind of separate room, were the toilet and the bathtub. Two of Warren's brothers were there, and one of them closed and locked the outer door. They stood by the vanity as if they were standing guard. What? What? There were other adults there that knew that something was about to happen to this boy, and instead of intervening, they stood guard. This is sick. The first time Warren brought me over by the tub, he knelt down so he could see my face. He took on a very serious tone. He said that God had chosen him to help me become a man, and that was about to happen. What was about to happen was God's will for me. This is how we know that this is the truth, because in Rachel's story something very similar was said. So he even uses the same wording, the same tone, the same oh man. This is how a boy becomes a man, he stressed. This is God's work. His voice was calm, matter of fact, and patronizing, as if he was explaining a key point of a doctrine to a kindergartner in the simplest possible ways. But then he got colder and sharper. You cannot tell anyone or say anything to anyone because this is between you and God. If you do tell, you will burn in hell. Oh, he said, trying to make me feel the flames. He had this mean, vicious look in his eyes. It was like he was looking through me. Then he told me to take off all my clothes. I was confused and frightened, so I did what I was told. He put me in the tub and made me bend over. Jesus. He put his hand over my mouth so that no one could hear me scream. And then I was in so much pain. There was nothing else. I thought I was going to die. Mercifully, I left my body. Oh, boy. I was never the same after that. At some point, everything went away. My feelings, but also all sensitivity. Any sense that the world was a good place. I just went numb. When he was done, I put my clothes back on. I had no idea what just happened. I didn't know there was such a thing as grape, or that it could happen to a boy. In kindergarten, I didn't even know where babies came from. As he was taking me out of the bathroom, Warren looked at his brothers. His eyes were full of fury and hatred. He seemed to want to show off his power, like he could do anything to anyone and get away with it. What had happened to me was a warning and a message, somehow I felt. Both his brothers looked down and away. I just don't understand how any person would be okay with just standing there as that happened, as that poor baby's innocence was being taken away. Then Warren walked me back to the classroom, where I quickly scurried to the farthest, most isolated corner I could find. Immediately, I was in tremendous pain again, bleeding and unable to talk. I tried to curl up into myself and rock and hide. I didn't want anyone to see me or say anything to me. I felt like I must have been a bad person for this to have happened to me, like it was some kind of punishment. Oh man. I've been told that it was what God wanted, so I must have done something terrible. Jeez, this is horrible. Why would God do that to a good boy? I felt like it was all my fault, that I should have done something to stop it. I felt filthy and disgusting and repulsive. And my feelings of shame were confirmed when no one even noticed that there was anything wrong with me. Oh boy. I just went home after class and changed my clothes. In the chaos of my household, the squeaky wheels got the oil. If you weren't complaining or causing trouble, you weren't very visible. Dogs that didn't bark or children who withdrew into themselves didn't get attention. It was the only way such a large family could function. The physical evidence of Warren's crimes left in my soiled and blood-stained underwear simply disappeared into our massive laundry pile. Wow, wow, wow. That breaks my heart for him. After that, at first, I lived on the constant edge of terror. I kept worrying that it would happen again. I was constantly on alert, nervous, jumpy, and when Warren did come for me again, I couldn't stop him. I didn't know how. I couldn't even explain it to myself, let alone tell an adult. He had so much power in the church that even if I had started kicking and screaming when he tried to take me out of the classroom, it probably wouldn't have made any difference. All I could do to protect myself was leave my body. But it seemed like every time I did that, I was less able to bring myself back. He disassociated to survive. He disassociated to survive these attacks. And no one is seeing this in him. No one is seeing his soiled underwear, like to see that there's evidence of what's been going on. And because he's just another number to him, to a lot of them, because he's not making a fuss, they don't even know that he's being terrorized by somebody who's meant to be a protector. This is sick. I would space out more and more. I could never predict when the abuse was going to happen. Though thinking back, it seemed like it was mostly Sunday mornings when I was in kindergarten and first grade. I know it stopped by the time I started second grade. I think it happened about 10 times, but because of the nature of my memories, I can't be sure. The unfortunate thing is it probably happened more than that. But because of how he had to leave his body in order to cope, there's probably times that he won't remember, and it's the body's way of protecting itself. After the first time, I wanted to avoid everything and everyone associated with it. Since I couldn't really do that, I split apart. I learned how to suppress the feelings the abuse gave me and put every aspect of the experience in a box in my head that could never be opened. I just willed myself not to go there, ever. It got to the point where I could even see Warren and not recall what he'd done. Ugh. I don't know how I managed this, but I felt that my survival required it. Yeah. And it worked for years. I didn't exactly forget what happened. I just never remembered it in any conscious way. I had emotions and feelings and reactions that I now know were related to Warren's abuse, but I did not make these connections. I reacted but didn't let myself think about why. I quarantined that part of me off and kept the rest of me safe as well as I could. Unfortunately, as a result, I learned to avoid feeling so well that I became unable to feel anything, good or bad. It was as though the world around me was a movie or a TV show, but I wasn't part of it, and sometimes I wasn't even watching. If anything even threatened to make me recall the abuse, I would leave my body again. I would go into this state where I went through whatever motions I had to in order to prevent the other people from bothering me and finding something wrong. But I wasn't really there with them. I didn't feel or remember anything when I was in that state. I just existed in a kind of suspended animation. I can see that same behavior now in so many people who are still in the FLDS. Although they seem robotic and placid on the surface, you can sense that somewhere hidden in them is a seething tangle of pain and rage. Like me, they have been traumatized, whether by life in the church or by abuse or by both. At home, I began to question everything I was asked to do. I felt like, how can life be like this? I was pissed off because I didn't have any answers about what happened to me. I thought if I asked questions about everything else, I could get some answers and maybe not be so confused. Whenever mom would tell me to do something, clean my room, do a chore, whatever, I would ask why. And she would try to explain to me why it needed to be done, but I still didn't want to do it. She would later say I was the hardest of her children to raise because I was always questioning, always protesting. None of her explanations were good enough for me. Anytime I felt that any authority was trying to exert control over me, I couldn't stand it. I had to take back some power. I guess getting a reason to do something made me feel like I had some. I didn't ask the bigger whys because I was so young. I couldn't even think that abstractly, and I was afraid to ask my dad. Oh, y'all, that was, ooh, that poor baby. The trauma, the trauma that comes with that. And to know that not only did it happen to him, but there were people that would stand guard as it was happening. Ooh. Chapter 8, Alta Academy. In 1989, I started first grade at Alta Academy. That meant that I had to spend more time around Warren. I dreaded it. Before that, pretty much the only time I'd seen him was on Sundays during church. I think the abuse happened only on Sundays, but some of the memories I have could have been from school. Needless to say, I did not like being around him at any time, but since he was our principal, I knew that I'd have more contact with him once I had to go to the first grade, and there was nothing I could do about that. The school day started at 7. This meant that the school day mornings were controlled chaos for us as the mom on child care duty woke and tried to ensure that everyone who needed to be was dressed and out the door in time. Mom herself got up at 5:30 or 6, having learned from experience that if she didn't get dressed then, she'd never have time during the day. If we didn't get up quickly enough, Mom would squirt water from a spray bottle in our faces, which usually did the trick. I've had a water bottle squirted on me before. Breakfast was typically some form of cereal, often hot malto-meal. School lunches were made in an assembly line by us kids, with one portioning out potato chips or slicing apples, one doing sandwiches, and another putting it all together in a brown paper bag. My first day, I remember walking down the sidewalk that led from our house to school with my brothers and sisters and going into the big building, nervous and not knowing what to expect in class. It seemed like a very long walk, but it was really only a few hundred feet. As it turned out, I felt more comfortable at Alta Academy, at least with the other kids, than I ever had in kindergarten. All the other kids were just like me in terms of religion and background, so I didn't stand out. Sure, I had to wear dorky long sleeve shirts with stiff collars and rustlers or no name jeans, but that wasn't nearly as bad when everyone else had to wear the same thing. Best of all, I didn't have to hide my background or feel like I was some kind of freak, the way I'd sometimes felt in kindergarten and among outsiders in general. At Alta, everyone else had pretty much the same story. I made a best friend quickly, a guy named Thomas. He was a tall, skinny kid with brown hair and blue eyes. I was pretty popular, but it was Thomas who understood when I had those moments where I had to hang back and tune out for a while. I would just tell him I felt sick and he'd let me be, without making me feel weird and without asking for any explanation. I felt safe with him. But because of what had happened, I often couldn't accept being told what to do, and I immediately started to rebel in class. I was a pretty consistent B student. It wasn't like I had any trouble with the material. I'm sure I could have gotten A's if I tried harder. I just didn't want to do things that made me feel controlled. I didn't want to be obnoxious or disrespectful to my teachers. I just couldn't stop questioning their assignments. I needed to do things for my own reasons. And if the teacher couldn't give me one, I would freak out because I felt hopeless. I now realize that other orders or commands must have reminded me of the vulnerability I felt when I was being abused. Sometimes I would be so wrapped up in my own thoughts that I wouldn't hear what the teachers were telling me to do. Then it seemed like I was rebelling even when I wasn't. Yeah. I never wanted to get in trouble because that would land me right where I didn't want to be, in Warren Jeff's office. Somehow, though, I couldn't help it. The school day started with morning meeting or devotional, which involved about an hour of Warren's boring preaching. Everyone in the entire school had to go. First through 12th grade, about 350 kids. The sermon was the same thing we'd hear in church: obedience, obedience, and more obedience. Sometimes Warren would call on the older students to come up to the front and testify, which meant they had to say how great the church was and how they saw God working through it in their lives. So they get called up and they got to lie. So what if they don't feel that way and they don't say it? Do they get in trouble for it? Ugh. He'd always call on the brown nosers, the kids who sought favor with him. No one dared to say anything disrespectful anyway, but then again, even when I reached junior high, he never, ever called on me. Still, I couldn't stand listening to him, and neither could Thomas. We soon worked out that we could say we had to go to the bathroom and then sneak into the classroom and hang out there, or even play in the school parking lot till morning meeting was over. Everyone else was in the meeting. There was no one to nail us. Eventually, however, the teachers did catch on. Thomas and I were both sent to Warren's office the first time we got caught. Sitting outside in the hallway, waiting to be called in, I felt dread in the pit of my stomach. I had no idea what would happen, and just the thought of possibly being alone with Warren terrified me. But when he took us inside, it actually wasn't too bad. Warren looked at us sternly and asked us why we had skipped devotional. "Don't you want to be a part of his church? This church," he demanded. Thomas and I looked at each other, and I thought, not really, but we didn't say anything. He preached at us for a while. That man loves to hear himself talk, but then he sent us back to our classroom. As I got more used to seeing and dealing with Warren, I was better able to block out any conscious thought of what he'd done to me. If they threatened to return, I just spaced out. I could shift into the state instantly, and sometimes I did when I saw him. I continued to rebel, but the connection between my spacing out or acting up and what had happened got lost as I pushed it further and further back in my mind. Most of what we were taught at Alta Academy was standard elementary and junior high school fare. I learned to read, write, and do math. All of the basics were well taught, I should say. I didn't have any trouble learning them. For some reason, the teachers were especially into cursive writing and calligraphy. So to this day, I have really good handwriting. But beyond the foundation of our education in history and science it was peculiar. Science, that's in quotes, was the most unusual, I discovered later. The teachers actually used scissors to cut the sections that were religiously objectionable out of the textbooks, and what was left didn't make much sense. Without context, it wasn't really science at all, just a set of disconnected facts. Instead of learning the fundamentals of biology or geology or physics, we were instructed on the church's accounts of natural phenomenon. Evolution, of course, was out, as it is in many fundamentalist religions, but the FLDS explanations for the evidence that supports evolution, like the discovery of dinosaur bones, were certainly unique. For instance, Warren taught that God made the earth from the scraps of other planets. Dinosaur bones were relics of his creation, not part of a prehistory that had occurred before humans evolved. Apparently, when you become the god of your own planet in the celestial kingdom, you don't get new materials to work with, but build your own realm out of bits and pieces of failed worlds, like a patchwork quilt made of rugs. That sounds crazy. Our God was given 7 days to do it by his God, and here we are as a result, they told us. We were also taught that man never landed on the moon, but I'm not sure why we were supposed to believe that. Asking why was a big no at Alta. You could get pulled out of class and taken to Warren's office just for doing that. Our religion was completely based on faith and authority. Asking for reasons was disobedient and ungodly, and questioning was simply not accepted. I don't know why I did not rebel by asking these bigger whys, but I didn't. I did think about them a lot, however. I would sit in class and wonder how it could be that there were millions of people in all kinds of religions, but we were the only church in the whole world that knew the truth. How can God, who created all of this, be so hard on all the people that he created, all the children? How could he put them on earth and give them freedom of choice to do whatever they wanted, but if they did the wrong thing according to our religion, known only to a few of these people, they'd have to go to hell? I always wondered what the hell is that about? How can this little church be the only true one? Apparently, I wasn't the only one with these questions. One day in 6th grade, a boy spoke up and asked how our people could be the only ones in the world who were right. I can still remember the teacher's reaction. It was as if she'd been hit in the face. Good question by the kid. Because I've said it before. I have my beliefs, but I feel like at the core of everything is love. I feel like if you operate in love, then you'll have, good things come to you, right? So hearing this, that this boy asked, how are we the only people out of everybody? We're the only religion that got it right. She immediately grabbed the kid and dragged him into the hallway shouting, "You come with me now, now." I don't know what happened to him, but we didn't see him until the end of the day, and no one ever asked a question like that again. See, he should be able to ask those type of questions, but that just goes to show you they don't really know. Because why would it be that big of a deal? Explain to him what the reasoning is and keep it moving. But you're going to discipline him because he wanted to be more knowledgeable? Mm-mm. We're going to end it right here. You guys, do me a favor, like the video. Let me know what you thought about these. This one was a little heavy, so I'm going to have to make sure that I put up the warning in the thumbnail. Thank you guys so much. Until next time, peace.